Did you know that Five Nights at Freddy's is already 10 years old? You guys feeling old yet? I could have sworn that the FNAF craze was back in like 2018 or something, but nah, it was released on August 8th in 2014. Which of course was followed by the first Markiplier video, which released like 4 days after, which created an absolute insane following behind the horror series, or at least I think that's the reason. I mean, the video did get 120 million views, but honestly, I'm just kind of too lazy to actually see, you know, where the actual origins of the popularity of the series came from. So we're just going to kind of nod in agreement and say that that's the reason. I remember watching the FNAF videos back in the day and seeing the really interesting game theories and the hidden things about the game, but the one thing that I never actually ended up doing was playing any of them. I didn't really play too many horror games back then, and I only really stuck to a few horror games until I started streaming and making videos, but even then, something about the FNAF games just kind of made me a bit anxious to try. That is until I saw the newest FNAF game called Five Nights at Freddy's Into the Pit. The gameplay looked a lot different, being that it's a side-scrolling adventure game, and it felt like something that I might actually be able to beat, and the jump scares, honestly, it looked a lot more tolerable, or at least I thought at the moment that it would be. So after some hardcore negotiations, I actually managed to get a code for the game by the developers to make this video, so thank you to Megacat Studios for providing me with a code. I really appreciate it. And just so that people are aware, I was not paid by Megacat Studios to make this video, so although I did receive a game code from them, my opinions toward the game in this video are 100% my genuine opinions, and I intend to be completely honest about what I liked and didn't like during my own personal experiences with playing the game. Also, I'm going to be going over the prologue of the game, which is about the first 30 minutes or so. So there will be some minor spoilers for those who are wanting to go into the game completely blind, but I'm going to try to avoid any potential spoilers, especially for the later portions of the game, just in case those who want to play the games for themselves can do so without, you know, obviously having anything spoiled. So a few weeks ago, I decided to stream my playthrough to my small community on Twitch so that I didn't have to suffer the potential panic attacks alone. And to be completely honest, the scares actually weren't that bad. I remember seeing all the playthroughs on YouTube of the older games, and they seemed pretty intense, but it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. But just to be clear, that isn't a bad thing. The game is still scary, and the stress to accomplish goals and have animatronics jump out at you and scream, just like in the older games, is still very much there. But anyways, let's go ahead and talk about the prologue and the general plot of the game. At the beginning of the game, we see our main character, who is named Oswald, drawing what I think is supposed to be Freddy when her dad calls us to leave because it's pizza time, and apparently pizza is the only thing that our father can actually afford to feed us. During the drive, we learn about how our dad has been struggling financially since the mill that he used to work at has closed down, and now he's been working at a corner store trying to get a full-time position there to hopefully be able to afford to feed us more than just pizza. After this little exchange of information, we find ourselves in front of a pizza joint called Jeff's Pizza, where our dad quite literally just drops us off and abandons us, with a short scene following after with our dad asking himself what kind of dad he is if he can't even afford to feed his own kid. It's pretty sad stuff that I'm pretty sure a lot of us can actually relate to, but if I'm being honest, I'm pretty sure if I was a kid who lived on a pizza diet, I'd kind of be happy about that. Back at Jeff's Pizza, we see Oswald kind of upset and mumbling to himself about how his dad is late again. And next to us is a family that's enjoying their meal and kind of talking about how apparently there's a secret ball pit somewhere hidden within Jeff's Pizza. And this right here is the part in the story where a choice could have been made by Oswald to completely avoid literally every other event that happened in this game, but nope. Instead, Oswald comes up with the great plan of, hey, let's go find the secret ball pit and go hide in it so that my dad can't find me when he finally comes back from the milk store, because that is going to get him back for being late, right? So Oswald goes snooping around the restaurant, trying not to get caught by the actual just one staff member that actually works here. And then we finally find it. The secret ball pit. Turns out random family number one wasn't lying about it after all. And this is where things, of course, kind of go downhill. As Oswald jumps into the ball pit, he finds himself almost immediately emerging with tons of screaming kids around him who are partying. And for some reason, the restaurant no longer looks like some kind of weird ancient ruin. I don't really understand why Oswald doesn't immediately question how the kids just somehow got into the room literally like 0.5 seconds after he jumped into the ball pit, but I guess we're just going to kind of overlook that for now. But after walking around for a little bit, seeing all the kids dancing, as well as some of the animatronic furries dancing on stage that was literally destroyed not even 5 minutes ago, we run into two kids named Chip and Mike. Us trying to be the absolute Giga Chad that we are with socializing with strangers, we comment on one of the kids' Future of the Flashback shirt, which clearly is a Back to the Future reference, and how it is one of Oswald's favorite movies. This, along with a few other comments about how they thought that we were the new kid from town and how the mill that her dad used to work at is brand new, is where we learn that we have actually pulled a Back to the Future and somehow went back in time. So yeah, it turns out that the secret ball pit that Jeff's been keeping locked away is actually some kind of time traveling device, because that makes sense, right? Shortly after, Chip and Mike invite us to play hide and seek, which I feel like was the game's way of kind of teaching us how to make use of the actual hiding mechanic in the game, which honestly was actually pretty well done and a great way to introduce this whole mechanic. After exploring around, we do stumble upon one of the animatronic suits and decide to hide inside of it, which seemed like a pretty bold move, because I'm pretty sure that I remember hearing somewhere that these animatronics would try to kill you by stuffing you into these suits, since the endoskeleton somehow either kills you permanently or traps you forever. I'm not too sure, but someone with more FNAF knowledge can feel free to let me know down in the comments. But anyways, the suit apparently is okay for some reason, and we decide to hide it. And then, boom, the lights go out and shit gets weird. We start hearing heavy breathing and the glowing blue eyes of one of the animatronics walking by, which then the game prompts you to hold your breath, which is where we learn about the QuickTime events and the audio mechanics that you will come across throughout the entirety of the game as part of the stealth system. Basically, to make it easy to understand, when you're sneaking around, you'll see this audio meter, and the more noise that you make moving around, the more likely that Freddy's going to be coming for that ass. If one of the creatures is close by and chasing you, you can hide anywhere you can as long as they don't see you entering the hiding spot. And you may be prompted with a QuickTime event where you literally just have to press a sequence of buttons, or you just kind of hold down a button in order to avoid being detected. So back in the Freddy suit, where we almost die from lack of oxygen, we begin to hear the screaming of kids, as not only has the power went out, but the animatronics have gone absolutely berserk and are literally tweaking out on stage, making demonic screams like they are a part of Lorna Shore. Oswald then begins to search around for Chip and Mike, but we end up running into one of the animatronics who seems nice and starts signaling for us to come along to find our friends, which obviously ends up being a terrible idea. But I mean, who knows? Maybe not all the creatures are bad, right? Nope. Of course, it ended up being a trap and we had to end up running away and hiding. But even though we ended up experiencing this, Oswald is not scared off at all. And us, being the hard-headed child that we are, decide that we cannot leave this restaurant until we have found our newly acquired friends for some reason. So we continue looking around in the dark while the crazed animatronics begin to lurk around, leaving us to constantly listen for sound cues and hide from anything that ends up chasing us. It didn't take too long though, because eventually Oswald just kind of finally calls it quits and we just run back to the ball pit, where we find ourselves back in the modern day with the confused store owner and our dad, who is searching for us right outside of the ball pit. The store owner leaves, our dad grabs his belt to beat us, and then as our dad approaches the ball pit to give us that whole, I was worried sick about you conversation, Freddy jumps out of the ball pit from the other time period and yanks our dad back into the ball pit with him. Seeing our dad being dragged into the pit, obviously we try to immediately save our dad, and we do successfully do it, but something is wrong, and the thing that we end up pulling back, it might look like our dad, but it ended up not being our dad at all. I mean, I don't know about you, but my dad's eyes don't glow, so I mean, little bit odd. And that is the end of the prologue. So to very quickly recap, the ball pit is a time traveling device. That is not our dad, and we need to try and save our real dad. So that's basically the story for the game. Now we have to live with this thing, try to get rid of it, and find our real dad by journeying back and forth between the past and future. It's actually pretty cool, and there are some pretty cool parts of the story which can alter the ending that you get for the game, as this game does have multiple endings. But the one thing that I'm confused by is that we end up seeing a Freddy in the past, but also in the future. Maybe that's just me being uncultured, not knowing all of the FNAF characters, and maybe one just looks like the other, or maybe the Freddy that is pretending to be our dad is also going back and forth between the past and the future. I don't really know, but I'll leave that for you guys to figure out. Overall, the game does do a great job of feeling like an actual horror game. Even though it is a side-scroller, it still does have a lot of scary moments. The tension is always there, but it never stays for too long, as the balance of going back and forth between the time periods actually helps to create a natural break in the tension so that it's not too overwhelming, while also not making the overall horror experience lackluster. There were jump scares, of course, I mean, it is a FNAF game after all, but none of them ever really felt out of place or overused in any way, which is really good. The chase scenes can be a little intense for those who are like me and get very anxious during chase scenes, but honestly, they weren't that bad either, especially if you know what you're looking for and are paying attention to the sound cues in the game, which leads me into the audio for this game. The soundtrack through the entire time of the game was an absolute joy to listen to. The ambience is very well done, but the one thing that I have to give the developers major props here for is how they actually managed to give a sense of direction through the audio cues. One of the biggest moments of dread during this game is when you're hiding in a room waiting to sneak over to that other area that's like 3 rooms away, but you have one or maybe even multiple animatronics roaming around. This, however, was easily managed because as long as you're wearing headphones, you can actually kind of tell where things are at all times to tell if it's safe or not to leave. Because if a door is opening or closing, most likely, I mean, it can be the room that you're in, but depending on the volume and everything, you can kind of tell whether or not it's the room that you're in or the room next to you and which room it might be. If you hear footsteps, depending on the loudness, it could mean that Freddy is in the room next to you or on the other side of the room that you're in. But because of the way that it's handled, you can, like, again, you can just kind of tell which direction it comes from and how close they are after just a little bit of actually listening and paying attention in the early parts of the game. You kind of get used to the pattern and you can kind of just tell. It's really neat. And I feel like they did a really good job with giving you the complete sense of direction and knowing where the enemy is most of the time. Not all the time, but most of the time through the audio. I also liked it because it just made the actual hiding sequences a lot less stressful. There were some moments where there was still stress in figuring out, you know, whether or not you're safe or not, especially during hiding sequences that take place in Oswald's home. But if you find yourself in those situations, all you gotta do is just stop, take a breath, listen, and you'll probably figure it out. I also really like how they use the audio to allow the enemies to detect where you are running or interacting with certain things that can cause them to be alerted. I'm not too sure if this game picks up on your mic or not. I didn't have it detect mine while I was playing, but it does detect like your footsteps and stuff in the game. You can also find certain items throughout the map that you can interact with that will help you in either distracting the animatronics, or if you're just completely unsure where they are in the house, you can actually use these items to grab their attention and then hide in like a closet or underneath the table or something and then wait for them to come out. And then once they start walking away, you can watch to see where they go, and then you can use that to get back on track and know where all the enemies are. Also, another thing that I would really like to point out is that while you are sneaking around and exploring, there's actually a good bit of collectibles that can be found throughout the game, which some can actually be used to repair the arcade machines in the modern timeline, allowing you to play different mini games on each of them. And I have to give bonus points to that because one of the things that I wish a lot more games had are just a bunch of random mini games just like this. It's unnecessary for sure, but it is a nice touch whenever you're really invested in a world, but you want to take a quick break from whatever you're doing for like a 5-minute arcade sesh. And if you combine the collectibles to be discovered along with the, I believe it's like 5 different endings that the game has, it helps to give this pretty linear story-driven experience a decent amount of replay value. And I do mean linear. Actually, one of my few negatives that I found in the game is that if a place didn't really have any use in that specific chapter, then you can't really go there. The library, for example, can't be entered the entire time of the game, but it's right there on the map, and the skull can't be entered during certain portions of the game, which kind of led me to feel like I might be locked out of exploring, and I might not be able to find some of the collectibles that I possibly have missed in those areas as I progress through the story, which kind of sucks. I'm a big fan of exploring, so it was a little bit of a letdown for me, but if I'm being honest, it wasn't enough to actually ruin my experience with the full game itself. As for the story, it's not too long. I think I beat it within about 5 or 6 hours during my live stream, but to be fair, I'm pretty sure it's possible to beat the story for this game a lot faster than that. I just got kind of stuck because some of the objectives can be a little bit vague and leave you confused as to what you currently need to do and where you need to go, which is kind of a big issue but I did find myself getting back on track rather fast. So I think this is one of those things that is subjective based on, you know, who's playing, as some people might have an easier time figuring out things more so than others. By the way, for those curious, I beat this game on the frightening difficulty, which is essentially the normal difficulty of the game. So if you're trying to beat this on the creepy difficulty, which is for those who want a more narrative-driven experience, then it will likely be faster. And once you beat the game, I believe that you unlock a harder difficulty, which of course, because it's harder, it's probably going to take you a lot longer to beat. So to answer the question, would I recommend this game to somebody who is new to the series and doesn't really know anything about the FNAF games? Definitely. I feel like this game could be a pretty solid starting point for anybody who wants to kind of like dip their toes into the series, but doesn't want to full on commit to it or anything. And maybe you're looking for something that's a little bit on the newer side. I mean, I never played the older games, and I didn't feel like I needed to know any of like the previous lore, the previous games, anything like that. Although I don't really know if there is anything that would carry over anyways. But yeah, I feel like that for anybody who is new to the series like I am, that this would be a very solid game to jump into. Plus, it is Halloween, at least right now at the time of the recording and at the time that the video releases. So, I mean, it's a good time to jump in and, you know, try out the game for yourself. I honestly found the gameplay mechanics and the story to be pretty solid, and the game has definitely not only left me with a desire to revisit the game, to try and get another one of the endings or find some of the many secrets that are scattered around the map on maybe like a future Twitch stream, but I can also say that I do actually feel interested in trying out the other FNAF games after playing this. Although I do know that the other games aren't a side-scrolling, story-driven adventure game like this, it makes me more curious about the lore behind the actual animatronics and the mysteries involving this pizza place. If you do try this game out for yourself and you're already a FNAF fan, then definitely let me know down in the comments which game is your favorite and also which one of the FNAF creatures is your favorite. And while you're at it, be sure to like and subscribe because I am a small little content creator here on YouTube and I would greatly appreciate it. I know that this video is a bit different than my usual ones, as this is the first time that I've made a video like this, but I do hope that you all enjoyed it. I do tend to make a variety of videos, including checking out horror games, RPGs, and doing game challenges, but I might actually make some more opinion videos like this in the future. And since October has just begun, this felt like a good time to make a video like this for those who are looking for recommendations for a new horror game to jump into during Halloween. But anyways, that's going to be it for tonight. I hope that you all enjoyed, and I will see you guys in the next video. Good night, everybody.